everyone, Julian here, and today I am going to be showing you how to make progressive melodic house in style of Lane 8. As usual, you can get the project file and samples, MIDI, presets, everything from this video is available right at the top of the description, and if you're a patron on my Patreon, check there. It is already available, and yeah, let's dive in. So this loop you heard in the intro, we're at 123 BPM. The first sound we have here is this little pluck, which sounds like this. So here's the MIDI for this one. The idea with this is, you have like the bass line kind of doing the chord progression, and then you have this that just keeps playing this riff the whole way through, while everything else is kind of changing around it. And yeah, for the notes with this one, it's actually not as complicated as you might think. You can see it's only about 6 notes actually, and a few of those, yeah, so it's really only like 4 notes here, I'm pretty sure. Just across different octaves. It's mainly just about writing like a catchy pattern that, like I said, will fit nicely over the bass line. You can hear like with each note that the bass goes to, or the chord progression I should say, this still works with that. So that's the goal, is to write something like that that's gonna stay in the same place nicely while everything else is moving. For the sound with this one, it's pretty simple. It's made using analog. So what we have here is, you can see, we have a saw wave and a square wave. I've got them both here. The square wave's turned down a little bit. That just kind of adds a bit of fatness and a little bit more extra texture to the sound. Then we got this going into a low pass filter, which has an envelope on it. That's how we get that plucky sound. And the amp envelope set like that. And then we have a bit of vibrato here inside of analog as well. So that just kind of gives it some nice warble and makes it feel a little bit more alive. After that, we have a bit of chorus. I've turned the dry wet down a bit. Here's without it. And then with it, so you can see, really subtle, but it's just giving everything like a bit of space and width. Then we have this echo and this reverb. So these are both also giving the sound quite a bit of space. You can see we've got these both just kind of giving it some ambience. And I've got the echo on ping pong mode, so the delays are bouncing back and forth from the left to right ear. So it also enhances the stereo image of the sound. After that, I've got a bit of drum bus. So this is fattening the synth up, and it's also kind of bringing out the reverb and the delay. Here's without this. You can see like it's not quite as full and like fat sounding. So that's what this does. It really makes it hit hard, because in order for something like this to work, this is kind of a small sound. And we have a lot of big sounds around it, especially like the drums and the bass and stuff. So you gotta make it kind of fat, and that's what this does. Yeah, and then finally I just have a compressor side chaining it to the kick, and that is it for the pluck. After that, we have this lead, which sounds like this. So the way this is made, I'll show you the notes first. You can see this is pretty simple too. It's pretty much actually a similar scale to what I used to play the pluck. It's just kind of like this, some simple just simple stuff in this key, A sharp minor. That's the key of this track. Nothing really too complicated there. It just kind of comes in like at the end of every 4 bars. And it just kind of helps transition, because if I turn this off, you can hear it's just a little bit flat. But then this gives it that last little sort of breath of life coming into that next chord. And yeah, so for the sound with this one, it's made using analog as well. We've got 2 square waves here. You can see I've got the LFO on both of their pulse widths, so You know, just giving it that really like smooth pulse width modulated sound. Also got them detuned a little bit. Those are going into a low pass. The low pass has an LFO on the frequency as well, so it's just giving the sound a lot of movement. Like with something like this, you don't want it to just sit in the same place. It's got like, you know, it's got some stuff moving around to kind of bring it to life. We got the amp envelope set like this. There's the LFOs. Then I just have a bit of vibrato and a bit of unison, and that is it for inside of the synth. After that, we have a bit of echo and reverb. The same deal as the Pluck, you know, just giving it some space. I've also got the ping pong on this echo, so it's just making it super wide and giving it a bigger stereo image, and then the reverb is pretty long. Then we have a bit of drum bus, which is fattening this up a bit. You know, even with these small lead type of sounds, you still need it to be fat to fit into the mix, because if I turn this off, you can see like it gets lost really easily. But there we go, that gives it what it needs to fit into the track. And then finally, I just have this being sidechained to the kick, and that is it for the lead. After that we have the pad, which is 2 layers, and it sounds like this. So what's happening here is we're playing this chord. This is just an A sharp minor chord. Like I said, that's the key we're in. So what's happening here is we have A sharp, C sharp, the minor third, that's the next chord, that's the next note in the chord, and then F, which is the 5th. So that's the next chord after the minor third. And then down here I just have another A sharp and another F to kind of round it out. So you get some low end in there, or some like, you know, kind of low mid-range in there. And yeah, so this is just kind of droning on in the background, you know. This is kind of like with the Pluck. This is staying in one place while the chord progression is changing and moving the track along. But you can, this makes a big difference. Like if I turn this off, there's a lot missing from the track without it. So yeah, and then for the sound with this one, the way it's made is using 2 layers. So the first is just this analog layer. So this is just a saw wave and a square wave. I've got a low pass filter, a little bit of an LFO on the filter, amp envelope set like that. And yeah, this is a really simple sound. It's just this little moving pad. And then underneath it, I have this FM pad here, which this just adds a bit of high end. So here's without it. You know, it's nice and warm, but it's a little bit too, like, mid-rangey. We wanted to fill up the mid-range, but we also need some high-end. So then this operator pad just comes through and adds some nice, sort of icy high-end to that. And it's a really simple sound. All it is it's just 2 sine waves, you can see, doing some FM. I've got the second one up a bit on the chorus pitch, and then I've got a bandpass filter on there as well, just to make it more focused in that high-end range. And yeah, and then those are just in an instrument rack, so it's a really easy way to layer 2 pads together. And again, like with the layering here, keep in mind, I'm not just layering 2 random pads together. When you layer like this, you have to be very careful to make sure, like, okay, this one is in one place, and this one is in a completely different place, and they complement each other. You can't just have 2 sounds playing together that are gonna clash, or, you know, it's like I wouldn't have this and then like another similar pattern underneath it. It has to be 2 layers that are gonna go together nicely. So I've got those going into this low pass filter here. Here's without it, and with it. So what's happening is, you can see it's just dialing back the high end a bit, but then the high end is like opening and closing because I have this LFO here. So this is giving it some movement now. So a lot of movement in the sound, because keep in mind, we have also this LFO on the filter that's on the first pad. So it's like, you know, just having all this cascading movement is how you get good sounds. It's really not that hard. You just have to kind of know how to do this stuff. Like, you know, have an LFO on the filter that's on the pad, and then have an LFO on another filter afterwards. And it's like, it starts to add up, you know? Then after that, we have a bit of chorus and some reverb. So these are just giving the sound some space. Then I have this echo, and this is actually not really doing that much delay. It's just here to give the sound kind of some width and spread it out a bit. So here's without it. and then with it. So you can hear what's happening. You know, with these kind of pads, you want it to be a bit wide because everything else is really going to be down the center. So if you have this just straight in the middle with everything else, you can hear. It doesn't stand out as much, but if you have it really be wide, now it's kind of like you hear everything else down the center, and then this is super wide. So it gives it a bit of a different place, and it makes it easier to kind of hear between the different layers. So with this one, what I've done is I've just got an echo here, and then I've turned off the sync so that these are at like milliseconds, and then they're also, I've got the left and right ear unlinked, and then you can see the left and right ear are just at two really different times. And that's how you get it, because you're hearing the left ear at a slightly different time from the right ear, and it creates this wide stereo image. And I wouldn't do this on every layer. You know, you still want this to work in the club. Like in the club, if you did this on, say, like the Pluck, I don't think it would work so well. But with a background layer like this, it works. It's all about just knowing like how to make it fit with this style. Yeah, then after that, we just have a compressor side chaining this to the kick. And then we have a high pass filter cutting out the low end. And that's it for the pad. After that, we have the kick, which sounds like this. So what this is it's two layers. We have this kick, you know, sort of a more standard, like just punchy, low end kick. And then I've got this clicky kick on top. So this is just, I'll play you the original sample. It's this kick. And then I just cut out the low end, because I really like the low end of this one. Like, with these kind of kicks, it needs to be this softer, more warm low end. Like, I'm noticing the style, it's not going to work if it's too deep. It needs to still have that kind of warmth to it. But this kick doesn't have that much click to it, as you can hear. So we just had that clicky kick on top. And then it's perfect. And again, I just had those in an instrument rack. So same deal with the layering here. I didn't just take two kicks in the same kind of style and put them together. I have two things that are doing completely different things, layering together to make one really nice sound. And yeah, and then I just have a bit of saturation on those. You know, it makes them punch a bit more, and it also kind of glues them together a bit. And that's it for the kick. After that, we have the bass, which sounds like this. So here are the notes for this one. You can see this is actually doing the chord progression. So this is how it'll be a lot of times in this style. Like, a lot of times you will have another synth doing the chord progression, but most of the time it's like this. All the synths are just doing all these different other things. And then the bass line is the thing that's giving you that chord progression. So that's what this is doing, and it's not that complicated. These kind of chord progressions are all about just sort of having, like, you know, one note ring out for maybe like 2 or 4 bars, and then switching to another one, and it's kind of like you're gonna only really just have like maybe 2 or 3 sort of main notes, or maybe even 4. That is your chord progression. Like in the case here, it would be F sharp and A sharp, and then you'll have like these other extra notes, which are just notes in the same key. So if we're in A sharp minor, for example, like we got A sharp, that would be our root note. You know, we've got this C sharp here, which is the minor 3rd. We have this G sharp here, which is a minor 7th. So it's like, you know, just using notes that are in the scale to write the chord progression. And yeah, so for the sound with this one, the way this is working is you can hear this bass is going do 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 do, even though these are long held out notes. So what I've done here is I have an arpeggiator, and you can see the arpeggiator is just playing one note, like it's not going up like that. It's just da 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 da. And then what I've done is it's on 8th notes, and then this allows you to control the length of the notes because you can play with this gate. And it gives you a lot of control over the sound. I like doing it this way because it just kind of sounds better when you can play with it like that. Like, you could automate that. Like, maybe in the beginning of your track it's like this. And then by the middle it gets to be more open or something. You know, I just felt it was kind of a more interesting way of doing it. But yeah, so this has 2 layers, this bass. It's this plucky layer. And then the sub. So for the plucky layer, what we've got is just a saw wave and a square wave. Saw wave is an octave up, and they're being detuned a little. Those are going into a low pass filter, which has an envelope on it. That's how you get the pluck. Then we get the amp envelope. And then finally I just have a high pass filter, because this is really just meant to be the mid-range bass. And then this is the sub. So what this is it's just this operator preset. It's pretty much just a sine wave. It's a sine wave, and then I have a little bit of FM from another sine wave here. So it's just adding a bit more harmonic content and kind of making the sub a bit fatter than if it was just a sine wave on its own. And yeah, and then on both of those, I just have a bit of drum bus. It's just sort of gluing them together and making them a bit fatter. I like using drum bus on my basses because it really makes them sound full. Then we have a compressor sidechaining this to the kick. This is probably the thing that's being sidechained the heaviest to the kick. And then I just have this EQ, which is just kind of cutting a little bit to make some room for the kick and boosting some low end. And yeah, and then I have the kick and the bass in a group together with just a bit of saturation. This is just that last little touch to make them really full sounding. Here's without it. And then with it. So you can hear, it just gives it that little bit of like an extra push to glue the low end together and make both the kick and bass as fat as they could possibly be. And yeah, after that we have the snare. So pretty simple, this one's more just about the type of sound you're choosing, like this kind of like big, almost like an 80s snare, with just like a lot of punch to it. And then just adding, you can see I've just got a little bit of reverb, a little bit of drum bass, and then an EQ just boosting the highs a little to make that come through a little bit more. And yeah, and then after that we have the shakers. So what it is we have a shaker loop to do sort of like the background stuff, and then we have a programmed one to sit on the upbeats. So for the programmed one, it's 2 layers, which is pretty simple actually. All it is it's this layer, this hi-hat, and then this shaker. So really the idea here is that it's mostly meant to be the shaker, like it really would be just a shaker on its own. However, if you listen, the shaker doesn't really have that much punch to it. So listen to what happens when I bring in the hi-hat. See how the hi-hat gives it that to the sound, like that little like kind of hit that it needs? There we go, that's why we have the layers. So it's a subtle layer, again, like it's really meant to just kind of sound like it's just the shaker, but that hi-hat does add something quite nice. And yeah, and then I just have a bit of saturation on those. And then for the loop, you can see the way I've done this here is basically I took this shaker loop. That one, and then I've just taken it and chopped it up a little. Just to kind of make it fit into the groove a little more. So you get that constant. And yeah, so that's me for this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed. As always, make sure to like this video as well as subscribe. And let me know what you think of this video in the comments. Like I said in the beginning, you can get the full project file and samples, and MIDI and presets. Everything from this video is available right at the top of the description on my Bandcamp. This is a great way to support me if you guys have been enjoying these videos lately. And yeah, thank you so much, guys, and I will see you tomorrow with another video.